It's time for polar coordinates. So polar coordinates, as you hopefully have seen from your polar graphing intro activity, are on a round graph. So let's go ahead and start seeing what these things are all about. A polar coordinate is made up of a radius and an angle. And it looks like this, r theta. Rectangular coordinates, as you can see on the graph, can be represented by polar coordinates, and polar coordinates can switch over to rectangular. You can see if you look at this, you can see they're about the same position on each of the graphs. We are going to figure out how to go back and forth later, so we'll do that later. We are going to start at the polar axis, as you can see in the figure. And that's how we're going to do the angle. So you start with the angle first. Then to do the radius, we're going to start at the pole, just like a North Pole, looking down on the Earth and seeing all the latitudes. If you could, that's what this is. This is like a North Pole. And you go from there and you go out the radius. So the radius is second. To make things easier, we're going to use a polar grid. The circular grid, if you use Desmos to see any of your graphings. Just like this. If you have your unit circle, that's going to be helpful because we are going to be using radians sometimes. But we'll talk about converting in a minute. Let's go ahead and graph the first one. And remember to start with the angle. That's always the best thing to do. So we're looking for 45, there it is. And we're going out 2, 1, 2. That's point A. And as you saw, I counted the rings. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So each ring, that's the radius of that circle. And so that's why we count the rings. Let's look at B. Okay, we have a negative. So if you have a negative, negatives mean opposite direction. So the negatives mean opposite direction, whether it's the radius or the angle, it just means to go in the opposite direction. And if you forgot, pi equals 180. So if you don't have a handy-dandy graph like mine with all the radians on it, you can still convert it. And this is 120. As you can see, it's already there. And we are going to go negative 4.5. So negative goes in the opposite direction away from the angle. If it's the radius, it goes away from the angle. So instead of going towards that 120, we're going to go away from it, starting at the pole. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4.5 right there. Okay, and that is point B. Point C. Oh, we got a negative angle this time. So that means we're going to go from this 360, we are going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to go down 30, and to figure out what that is, I am going to subtract it. So it's actually 330, which is right here. And then I'm going to go out 3 towards it because it's positive. 1, 2, 3. So that is point C. All right, we're going to do a few of these just to get the hang of it a little bit better because this will help you with the next section. So for letter A, I'm going to plot point D at 240. 240 is in the third quadrant right here. And I'm going 2.5 towards it. 1, 2.5 towards it because it's positive. So there's D. Pi over 2 is 90. So I'm going to go to 90, but I am going to go in the negative, I'm going to go away from 90. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's E. Next, we have negative 300 for an angle. Well, 360 minus 300 is 60. So we're going to go to 60, go negative 300 to 60, and in the 4 rings out. So 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. That would be F. The next one is a negative angle and a negative radius. Well, let's see what this is. So 360 minus negative 135 is negative 225. So I'm sorry, positive 225. So positive 225 right there. And negative 2. So we are going away from 225, going in the opposite direction to 1, 2, right there for G. And the last one, okay, that's negative 7 pi over 6. Well, that's negative 210. And so 360 minus 210 is 150. So I'm going to 150. That's over here. And I'm going towards it 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's H. And you're going to get some practice on your own to do these. All right. We just have one little section left, and it is, as you could see when we were doing the 360s, you can name angles multiple ways because of the coterminal angles. That means that you can go around and around and come to the same angle. So that means that polar coordinates can be represented infinitely many ways. But we're just going to keep ours limited to between negative 360 and 360, which in radians is negative 2 pi to 2 pi. So we have all these coterminal angles with the 360s. And we also have the opposite ones with the negative radius. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we are going to name each point 4 different ways. First point, 435. 135. And I'm going to go ahead and plot that. I'm going to find my 135, and I'm going to go towards it 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is point T. So, and I came to that by going 135. Okay, so that's one way to get to that point. Then if I subtract 135 minus that 360, I'm going to get, let me go ahead and change colors here. Okay. I'm going to get negative 225. So this is another way to get to the same point. If I go negative 225 and towards that angle, 4, that's 2 ways to get to that point. But then we are going to change R to the opposite. We're going to change it to the opposite sign. So now I'm going to use a negative 4. So now I'm going away from the opposite angle. I'm going away from the angle that matches up with that on the opposite side. So that means I am going to do 180s. So if I do 135 plus 180, that's 315. So let me show you how that goes. I go all the way around to 315, right there. And then I'm going to go in the opposite direction, 4. Opposite direction. Okay, then our last one, I can do 135 minus 180 to get negative 45. Negative 45 is right there, and that's why it's in the opposite direction, just like the 315 was, to get to that point. So all of your angles need to come together to get to that point. Notice, this is important. I want you to notice this because this rule is not foolproof. Just because it worked for all of these points, it's not going to work for all the other points. I'm going to show you the other ways in a few minutes here in the next one. I want you to know the relationship. So if they're both positive, they are 360 apart. So for the positive radii, they are 360 apart. For the negative radii, they are 360 apart as well. And you can see that when you graph it. They are 180, the 2 points, are 180 from each other. So the positive radii is 180 degrees from the negative radii. And so those are the relationships I want you to try to know. Okay, on these 2 examples, we're going to come across a little trouble. So I'm going to try to show you the easiest ways to deal with these. It's not always going to be subtract 360, then add 180, then minus 180 every time. You're going to have to know the relationships of the angles that you have. So the best way to do this is to go ahead and start plotting what you have. So we have 5, negative 240. If you don't know what negative 240 is, then we are going to 360 minus the 240, just like we did from the very beginning when we were plotting the points. To find the same point, it's start at 360 and go negative 240 to 120. So that's actually the first point that we're going to plot, 5, 120. So I'm going to find 120, and I'm going to go 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 towards it. So that is our point, okay? And we went 120 to get there. The original point that was given was negative 240, and so that is how you get to that one. 360 from each other. So both of the positives are 360 from each other. One is going in the positive direction, 120. The other is going in the negative direction, 240. So next we have to do our negative numbers. So if the first one was add. So if I add 180 to 240, I am going to get negative 60. And that is in the range. It has to be between negative 360 and 360. And it is. So, but I don't like to plot things this way. So I'm going to switch my color again and figure out what its opposite match is. My 360, so 360 minus 60 is 300. So that's where I'm going to go next. I'm going to go to the 300. And you can see that they're the opposite angles. The yellow angle and the blue angle are opposite angles, and that's what we want. So 300, but I'm going to go around to the 300. And I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going away from the 300, and that's why it's negative 5. And then to show you the last one, the negative 60 comes here too, and it also goes away from that angle for the negative 5. All right, let's do one more of these, maybe 2. I'm going to erase all the stuff on my graph so I can show you the next one. And I'm going to go ahead and start with green. This one, when you have radians, I convert them to angles to make everything easier, and then at the end I'll convert it back to radians. So that is 30 degrees. So I have 30 degrees and it's going -3. I can plot that because the angle is positive. So I can do 30 degrees and I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm going 1, 2, 3 in the opposite direction. So this is the point that we are looking at. Everything is going to go to this point. To show you how I got here, I went 30 degrees to here, and then I went in the opposite direction to get there. Now, remember, the other negative is 360 from 30. So if I do 30 minus 360, just like our rules say, we will get -330. Oh, I'm using the same color. I need to switch colors. I'll switch it now. Just go ahead and redo these colors here. I want to make sure you see the difference. Okay, so I did -3, and it's 360 from it. So that's -330. And I'll show you how I get there. -330 will take us all the way around to here. And opposite direction, because of the negative radius, will take us up there. So now we need to find the two positive ones, which actually should be pretty easy, because if I just look at this graph, it's 210. So +3, 210 is my regular angle right there. You could have added the 180 to it and gotten your 210. Now we need to find the last one. So we've got two negatives, I need two positives, it's 30. How am I going to find this? Well, let's see. If I subtract 30 minus 330, so 30 minus the 330, 30 minus the 180, my bad, that's going to be -150, and that works out. So most of the time it's going to be all right, but you've got to know, and so that -150, that's here, just to show you. It's going to work out, but sometimes you're going to get bigger numbers or smaller numbers, and you're going to have to figure out, well, I can't go that way, I have to go another way. If you can see the relationship on the graph, and if you can figure out the two negatives are going to be 360 from each other, and the two positives are 360 from each other, and the positive-negative relationship is 180. If you can get that, it'll be good. So after you practice a few, I think that'll help. Here's my last one. I didn't give you any angles this time. I gave you a point. So I'm going to name the point first, and that's going to be my first point, so that's going to be really helpful. And that's at 315, and it's out 6. So 6, 315 is my first point. That was easy. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that all the way around to 315. No negative radius, just going to use the same one. The opposite one is 315 minus 360, right there, and that's 6, -45. Now I need my two negatives, and this is where people have trouble. But if you can graph it on here, you can see the opposite of 315 is 135. So that's how I'm going to do that. I'm just going to put 135, which actually 315 minus 180 is 135. So that worked out. And the last one, well, let me go ahead and graph that. So to 315 and opposite 6 from the origin there. Last one is in the opposite direction. So let's see, if I do 315 plus 180, which is the last thing that I haven't done yet, I'm going to get a huge number. So that's not what I want. That's 495. So let me just show you. 315 plus 180, that's 495. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is 360, 135 minus 360, because that will give me my other angle the other way. So -6, -225. And I don't know if you can tell this, but remember from the unit circle, I'm using all the 45s here. The 45s from each quadrant are used here. So I went -225 and -6. You'll get it. I have faith in you. And I will be posting some more hints maybe if I hear too many people are confused. You got a worksheet to do. Make sure you email me if you have questions.